The palace had not known silence in centuries. Its halls usually sang with resonant chimes, drifting melodies, and the low hum of royal attendants moving with quiet purpose. But on that night, when the twin moons crossed over the spired towers and the banners hung motionless in the still air, silence fell like a shroud, a silence so deep that even the wind seemed unwilling to disturb it. And in that silence, only one figure remained at his post, the human. His name was Darren, a simple name among the starbound civilizations, but a name that carried more weight in that moment than any title, spoken within the royal court. Darren stood before the sovereign's chamber, the tall crystalline doors gleaming faintly in the dim light. His armor was dented from earlier battles, streaked with dust and dark, scarring from energy blasts. His breath came slow and steady. His stance never wavered. He listened to the silence with every fiber of his being. Behind those doors rested the sovereign of the Leora, a ruler whose wisdom guided more than a dozen systems, a ruler whose fate now rested entirely in the hands of the lone human, guarding her as the palace around them waited in dreadful stillness. Hours earlier, the palace had been a battlefield. The enemy had descended from orbit with a storm of fire. Their machines tore through outer defenses with ruthless precision. The Leora warriors had fought fiercely, but they had been outnumbered and overwhelmed. Darren had been among the inner guard when the alarm sounded, and he had run through smoke-filled corridors to reach the sovereign's chamber. The sovereign herself had been injured in the chaos, weakened by a forbidden toxin unleashed during the attack. Her attendants had rushed her into the recovery chamber, sealing the doors with ancient locks of radiant crystal. Now the inner halls were empty. The royal guard had fallen. The enemy had breached. The palace walls. And Darren alone stood between them and the weakened sovereign. He had never known fear to feel so sharp and so quiet at the same time. Not the kind that made him tremble. Instead, the kind that sharpened every instinct, every thought, every breath. The kind that forged resolve. The silence broke with a distant clatter that echoed faintly down the hall. Metal meeting stone. A weapon recharging. A step too heavy for any Leora to make. Darren tightened his grip on the long spear he carried. A Leora weapon, elegant and silent, its edge humming with contained energy. He had already used it to defeat 2 of the intruders earlier, but many more had entered the palace. He recognized the rhythm of the distant steps now. Enemy soldiers, seeking the sovereign, seeking the power her lineage carried, seeking control over the system she ruled. A softer sound followed, a whisper through the air. One of the palace's spiritual conduits flickered as if trying to warn him. Darren raised the spear, steady and ready, and his heart beat a slow and deliberate cadence. He could not fail. He would not fail. He had promised this sovereign herself earlier that day, a promise spoken in a quiet moment, long before the attack. A promise she had almost laughed at, calling it unnecessary. But Darren had meant every word. He had vowed to guard her with all the strength he carried as a human. She had looked at him then with her luminous eyes, and nodded with a gentle expression that held more trust than he believed he deserved. That memory kept him standing strong. Now, footsteps grew louder. Darren positioned himself in the center of the hall, body angled, spear held with precision. His muscles tensed but did not shake. His breath remained steady. His eyes fixed on the shadow at the far end of the corridor. From the darkness emerged 3 enemy soldiers, each clad in heavy plated armor. Their visors glowed with pale red light. Their weapons crackled with volatile energy. They had been told the sovereign was near. They had been told no one remained to defend her. They paused when they saw him. A single human. One of them spoke in a harsh voice that scraped the silence apart. He ordered Darren to move aside, promised a swift end if he complied. promised suffering if he resisted. Darren said nothing. He shifted his weight forward just slightly. A tiny movement that carried an unmistakable meaning. He would not move. The soldiers raised their weapons. Darren moved first. He dashed forward with surprising speed, the spear cutting through the air and striking the first soldier's chestplate with a burst of bright light. The armor cracked. The soldier fell. The second raised his weapon, firing a bolt of energy that sizzled past Darren's shoulder and scorched the wall. Darren spun, slashing across the second's weapon arm and sending it falling to the ground. He swept the spear's end across the soldier's legs, and the armored figure crashed down. The third lunged with a vibrating blade aimed at Darren's side. Darren caught the blade on the spear's shaft, sparks scattering across the floor. He turned, using his momentum to shove the soldier back. The soldier staggered. Darren thrust the spear forward with precise force, striking the enemy's chest and sending him collapsing beside the others. Silence returned. Darren stood breathing heavily for a moment, listening for more footsteps. But there were none. His arm ached. His shoulder burned where the enemy's energy bolt had brushed him. Yet he remained on his feet. When he turned back toward the sovereign's chamber, his resolve only strengthened. He stepped back into position. The silence grew deeper. Moments turned into minutes. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. The palace lights dimmed as night settled over the world outside. The sovereign remained behind the crystalline doors, unseen but ever present in Darren's mind. The toxin she had been struck with would take time to burn from her system. Time she and the realm did not have. Her own healers had said as much before fleeing to secure documents and artifacts. Darren had been the one who insisted he would stay. He was a human on an alien world, a visitor from a species known for its stubborn will. And in that moment, he stood taller than any tower in the city. But then another sound echoed through the hall. A voice soft, weak. It came from behind the crystalline doors. Darren. Her voice. Darren turned quickly. He dared not open the doors. Doing so would expose her to danger. He pressed one hand against the cool crystal. "I am here," he answered firmly, yet softly. "You should flee," her voice whispered faintly. "The enemy seeks me. You have no reason to share my fate." Darren felt a wave of fierce determination rise inside him. Not anger, not fear. Something deeper. The kind of resolve that humans had carried since the first of them had looked at impossible odds and chosen to stand anyway. "I will not leave you," he said. "I promised you. I would guard you. I intend to keep that promise." There was a long pause. The silence felt warmer now, sadder, but also filled with trust. "I believe you," she murmured, "and I am grateful." Darren lowered his head slightly, letting the weight of her words steady him. He resumed his stance, but the silence did not last long. A deep rumble shook the hall. The ceiling lights flickered. Dust drifted from the high archways. Darren immediately raised his spear, his senses sharpening. Something heavy approached. Something far larger than ordinary soldiers. At the far end of the hall, a massive shadow emerged. A towering assault mech, plated in dark alloy and bristling with weapons. Its steps made the floor tremble. Its visor burned with harsh crimson light. Darren felt a cold chill run through him. He had seen these machines on the field before. They were powerful enough to breach armored bunkers. They were built to crush resistance with unstoppable force. And now one stood between him and the sovereign. The mech raised its arm. A cannon glowing with swelling energy. Darren stood tall. His legs braced. His grip tightened. He could not fight this thing. Not with his strength alone. Not with the spear alone. But he could try. He could buy her time. He could stand when the cannon fired. Darren dove to the side, rolling across the floor as a beam of blistering energy tore through the corridor. Marble shattered. The ground burned. Darren forced himself back to his feet, sprinting forward as the mech recharged its cannon. He darted behind a fallen column, breathing heavily. He glanced at the Sovereign's chamber doors. They remained intact, glowing faintly with protective enchantments. He had to keep the mech away from them. He charged. He sprinted along the side of the hall, weaving between pillars, each step calculated. The mech's sensors tracked him, adjusting its aim. Another blast tore past him, sending scorching heat across his back. Darren jumped behind another column, then hurled himself forward, rolling beneath the mech's arm as it lowered. He thrust the spear upward with all the force his body could muster. The spear struck the mech's joint, sparks spraying as the armor dented. The mech staggered, but did not fall. It swung its giant arm, sending a shockwave that knocked Darren across the hull. He hit the ground hard, pain exploding through his ribs. He forced himself up again. The mech turned toward the crystalline doors. No. Darren single quotes S vision blurred. But he charged again. His legs screamed in protest. His breath burned, but he did not stop. He leapt, driving the spear into the mech's targeting sensor. The sensor cracked. The mech jerked violently, firing a blast upward instead of forward. Energy ripped through the ceiling, sending debris crashing down. Darren clung to the mech's arm, using the spear to anchor himself. The mech thrashed. Darren held on. He climbed along its arm, muscles trembling, and drove the spear once more into a weaker joint. The weapon pierced deeper this time. The mech faltered. Its left arm went limp. Its balance shifted. Darren saw his chance. He pushed off, leaping from the mech just as it toppled.